Marcus Thompson had built his reputation as Portland's most exclusive restaurant owner by keeping certain people out. But when he insulted a veteran service dog in front of 180 Hell's Angels, he was about to learn that some lines should never be crossed. What happened next would change everything he thought he knew about respect, power, and the consequences of judging people by their appearance. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you. Make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The morning sun cast long shadows across the cobblestone streets of downtown Portland as Marcus Thompson adjusted his silk tie and surveyed his domain. The Golden Spoon had become the city's most sought-after dining establishment, a place where tech moguls rubbed shoulders with socialites and where a single dinner reservation could cost more than most people's monthly rent. Marcus had worked 15 years to build this empire, transforming what was once his grandmother's modest diner into a temple of culinary excellence. Standing behind the mahogany host station, Marcus embodied everything his restaurant represented: polished, refined, and utterly uncompromising. His steel grey hair was swept back perfectly, his Italian suit fit like a second skin, and his cold blue eyes missed nothing. He had built his success on a simple philosophy: exclusivity breeds desire, and desire drives profit. The Golden Spoon wasn't just a restaurant. It was a statement, a declaration that only the worthy could enter. The lunch rush was approaching, and Marcus watched his staff prepare with military precision. Crystal glasses sparkled under the soft lighting. White tablecloths lay without a single wrinkle, and the aroma of truffle oil and aged wine filled the air. Everything was exactly as it should be. 20 miles away, Jake Morrison was having a different kind of morning entirely. The 34-year-old Army veteran sat on the edge of his bed, his prosthetic leg lying beside him as he massaged his remaining thigh. The phantom pain had been particularly brutal last night, keeping him awake until nearly dawn. Beside him, a beautiful German shepherd named Ranger watched with intelligent brown eyes, sensing his handler's discomfort. Jake reached over and ran his fingers through Ranger's thick coat. The dog had been his constant companion for 3 years now, ever since the VA had paired them together. Ranger wasn't just a pet, he was Jake's lifeline, trained to detect the onset of PTSD episodes, retrieve his medication, and provide deep pressure therapy during panic attacks. The bond between them ran deeper than most people could understand. "Ready for another adventure, boy?" Jake asked, securing his prosthetic and reaching for his worn leather jacket. Today was special. His younger sister Amanda was getting married next month, and the family had planned a celebration lunch at some fancy place downtown. Jake rarely ventured into Portland's upscale district, preferring the quiet of his small apartment on the outskirts of the city. But family was family. As Jake prepared to leave, he carefully attached Ranger's service dog vest, complete with the official patches and identification that legally allowed them access to any public establishment. The vest was more than fabric and patches. It was Ranger's uniform, a visible symbol of his important work and Jake's right to independence despite his disabilities. The motorcycle waiting in Jake's driveway was a testament to both his past and present. The custom Harley-Davidson Sportster had been modified to accommodate his prosthetic leg, with special foot controls and a lower seat. The bike represented freedom, the wind in his face helping to quiet the memories that sometimes threatened to overwhelm him. Ranger had his own specially designed sidecar, complete with safety harness and wind protection. As they rode through Portland's streets, Jake couldn't help but notice the stares. A man with a prosthetic leg on a motorcycle, accompanied by a service dog, drew attention wherever he went. Some looks were curious, others sympathetic, and a few were dismissive. Jake had learned to ignore them all, focusing instead on the road ahead and the steady presence of his four-legged partner. The Golden Spoon stood like a fortress of glass and steel in the heart of Portland's financial district. Its imposing facade promised luxury and exclusivity, with valet parking and doormen in crisp uniforms. Jake felt a familiar tightness in his chest as he parked his Harley across the street. These kinds of places always made him uncomfortable, with their unspoken dress codes and judgmental atmospheres. "We can do this, Ranger," he whispered, more to himself than to the dog. "It's just lunch with my family." Inside the restaurant, Marcus was reviewing the reservation list when his maitre d', Harrison Webb, approached with a concerned expression. The lunch service was about to begin, and every table was booked solid. Portland's elite would soon fill every seat, and everything had to be perfect. "Sir, the Henderson party has requested the private dining room for their celebration," Harrison reported. "Apparently it's for the bride-to-be's brother, recently returned from military service." Marcus nodded absently. The Henderson family had been loyal customers for years, always ordering the most expensive items on the menu and leaving generous tips. Their business was valuable, and he had no intention of disappointing them. However, he made a mental note to ensure their military guest understood the restaurant's standards. Marcus had specific ideas about the type of clientele that belonged in his establishment. "Make sure they understand our dress code," Marcus instructed. "Military service or not, I won't have anyone lowering the tone of this establishment." Marcus Thompson had built his reputation as Portland's most exclusive restaurant owner by keeping certain people out. But when he insulted a veteran service dog in front of 180 Hell's Angels, he was about to learn that some lines should never be crossed. What happened next would change everything he thought he knew about respect, power, and the consequences of judging people by their appearance. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The morning sun cast long shadows across the cobblestone streets of downtown Portland as Marcus Thompson adjusted his silk tie and surveyed his domain. The Golden Spoon had become the city's most sought-after dining establishment, a place where tech moguls rubbed shoulders with socialites, and where a single dinner reservation could cost more than most people's monthly rent. Marcus had worked 15 years to build this empire, transforming what was once his grandmother's modest diner into a temple of culinary excellence. Standing behind the mahogany host station, Marcus embodied everything his restaurant represented: polished, refined, and utterly uncompromising. His steel-gray hair was swept back perfectly, his Italian suit fit like a second skin, and his cold blue eyes missed nothing. He had built his success on a simple philosophy: exclusivity breeds desire, and desire drives profit. The Golden Spoon wasn't just a restaurant, it was a statement, a declaration that only the worthy could enter. The lunch rush was approaching, and Marcus watched his staff prepare with military precision. Crystal glasses sparkled under the soft lighting. White tablecloths lay without a single wrinkle, and the aroma of truffle oil and aged wine filled the air. Everything was exactly as it should be. 20 miles away, Jake Morrison was having a different kind of morning entirely. The 34-year-old Army veteran sat on the edge of his bed, his prosthetic leg lying beside him as he massaged his remaining thigh. The phantom pain had been particularly brutal last night, keeping him awake until nearly dawn. Beside him, a beautiful German shepherd named Ranger watched with intelligent brown eyes, sensing his handler's discomfort. Jake reached over and ran his fingers through Ranger's thick coat. The dog had been his constant companion for 3 years now, ever since the VA had paired them together. Ranger wasn't just a pet. He was Jake's lifeline, trained to detect the onset of PTSD episodes, retrieve his medication, and provide deep pressure therapy during panic attacks. The bond between them ran deeper than most people could understand. "Ready for another adventure, boy?" Jake asked, securing his prosthetic and reaching for his worn leather jacket. Today was special. His younger sister Amanda was getting married next month, and the family had planned a celebration lunch at some fancy place downtown. Jake rarely ventured into Portland's upscale district, preferring the quiet of his small apartment on the outskirts of the city. But family was family. As Jake prepared to leave, he carefully attached Ranger's service dog vest. complete with the official patches and identification that legally allowed them access to any public establishment. The vest was more than fabric and patches. It was Ranger's uniform, a visible symbol of his important work and Jake's right to independence despite his disabilities. The motorcycle waiting in Jake's driveway was a testament to both his past and present. The custom Harley-Davidson Sportster had been modified to accommodate his prosthetic leg, with special foot controls and a lower seat. The bike represented freedom, the wind in his face helping to quiet the memories that sometimes threatened to overwhelm him. Ranger had his own specially designed sidecar, complete with safety harness and wind protection. As they rode through Portland's streets, Jake couldn't help but notice the stares. A man with a prosthetic leg on a motorcycle, accompanied by a service dog, drew attention wherever he went. Some looks were curious, others sympathetic, and a few were dismissive. Jake had learned to ignore them all, focusing instead on the road ahead and the steady presence of his four-legged partner. The Golden Spoon stood like a fortress of glass and steel in the heart of Portland's financial district. Its imposing facade promised luxury and exclusivity, with valet parking and doormen in crisp uniforms. Jake felt a familiar tightness in his chest as he parked his Harley across the street. These kinds of places always made him uncomfortable with their unspoken dress codes and judgmental atmospheres. "We can do this, Ranger," he whispered, more to himself than to the dog. "It's just lunch with my family." Inside the restaurant, Marcus was reviewing the reservation list when his maitre d', Harrison Webb, approached with a concerned expression. The lunch service was about to begin, and every table was booked solid. Portland's elite would soon fill every seat, and everything had to be perfect. "Sir, the Henderson party has requested the private dining room for their celebration," Harrison reported. "Apparently it's for the bride-to-be's brother, recently returned from military service." Marcus nodded absently. The Henderson family had been loyal customers for years, always ordering the most expensive items on the menu and leaving generous tips. Their business was valuable, and he had no intention of disappointing them. However, he made a mental note to ensure their military guest understood the restaurant's standards. Marcus had specific ideas about the type of clientele that belonged in his establishment. "Make sure they understand our dress code," Marcus instructed. "Military service or not, I won't have anyone lowering the tone of this establishment." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "Jake, you made it!" Amanda exclaimed, pulling back to look at him with genuine affection. "And you brought a Ranger. Mom, Dad, look how handsome they both are." Robert Henderson stood to shake his son's hand, his eyes reflecting both pride and the lingering worry that had never quite left since Jake's deployment. "Son, you look good." "Really good." Margaret Henderson, Amanda's mother, approached Ranger with respectful caution. She had learned about service dogs since Jake's injury, understanding that these weren't pets, but working animals with important jobs. "Hello, Ranger," she said softly, making no attempt to pet him without permission. The family settled around the elegantly appointed table, their conversation flowing naturally as they caught up on recent events. Jake began to relax for the first time in days, surrounded by people who loved him unconditionally. Ranger positioned himself beside Jake's chair, alert but calm, his presence providing the security that allowed his handler to engage socially. Their waiter, a seasoned professional named David Chen, approached their table with genuine warmth. David had served the Henderson family many times before and appreciated their kindness toward staff. He also recognized the significance of Ranger's service vest and the professionalism required in such situations. "Good afternoon, everyone. It's wonderful to see the Henderson family again," David said, including Jake in his welcoming smile. "Can I start everyone with drinks? And sir," he addressed Jake directly, "would your service dog like a water bowl?" Jake smiled gratefully. "That would be great, thank you." As David moved to fulfill their drink orders, Marcus Thompson appeared at the dining room entrance. His presence seemed to lower the temperature in the room. his cold demeanor immediately apparent to everyone present. He surveyed the scene with calculating eyes, taking note of every detail. "Mr. Henderson," Marcus said with practiced politeness that didn't reach his eyes. "I trust everything is satisfactory?" "Marcus, yes, absolutely," Robert Henderson replied, though something in the restaurant owner's tone put him on edge. "This is my son Jake, the one I mentioned." "Jake, this is Marcus Thompson, the owner." Jake started to rise, but Marcus held up a hand. "Please don't get up. I actually need to address a situation." His gaze fixed on Ranger with unmistakable disapproval. "I'm afraid we have a problem with the animal." The word animal hung in the air like a slap. Amanda's smile faded, and Robert Henderson's expression darkened. Jake felt his chest tighten, the familiar surge of anxiety beginning to build. "Ranger is a service dog," Jake said quietly, his voice steady despite the growing tension in his body. "He's legally permitted in all public accommodations." Marcus's smile was thin and condescending. "I'm sure you believe that. But emotional support animals don't have the same rights as actual service dogs. This is a high-end establishment with specific health and safety standards." The deliberate mischaracterization hit Jake like a physical blow. He had encountered ignorance before, but rarely delivered with such calculated cruelty. Ranger, sensing his handler's distress, shifted slightly closer, his warm presence providing immediate grounding. "He's not an emotional support animal," Jake said, his voice gaining strength. "He's a trained service dog. He alerts to medical episodes, retrieves medication, and provides mobility assistance." Marcus's expression remained unchanged. "I'll need to see documentation, certification papers, and proof of training." "Until then, the animal needs to wait outside," Margaret Henderson gasped audibly. "Marcus, surely you can't be serious?" "Jake served our country. He was injured in combat." "I don't make exceptions," Marcus cut her off sharply. "Military service doesn't exempt anyone from health department regulations. The dog goes, or the entire party leaves." The ultimatum landed like a bomb in the quiet dining room. Other patrons at nearby tables had begun to notice the commotion, their conversations dying as they strained to overhear what was happening. David Chen stood frozen near the bar, a water bowl for Ranger still in his hands, his face reflecting his horror at his employer's behavior. Jake's hands began to tremble slightly, the stress triggering the early stages of a PTSD episode. Ranger immediately responded, pressing his body against Jake's leg and applying the deep pressure that helped regulate his handler's nervous system. The dog's intervention was smooth and professional, nearly invisible to casual observers, but absolutely crucial to Jake's well-being. "You can't ask me to prove my disability," Jake said, though his voice had begun to shake. "That's illegal discrimination." Marcus stepped closer, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper that somehow seemed more threatening than shouting. "This is my establishment, and I decide who belongs here. You can follow my rules, or you can take your problems somewhere else. I won't have my other guests made uncomfortable by your situation." The word situation dripped with disdain, reducing Jake's service, sacrifice, and injury to an inconvenience for wealthy diners. Amanda Henderson stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor with a sharp sound that seemed to echo through the room. "How dare you speak to my brother that way?" she said, her voice shaking with rage. "He gave his leg defending this country, and you're treating him like he's some kind of criminal." Marcus turned his cold gaze on her. "Miss Henderson, I suggest you control yourself. Your family's patronage doesn't give you the right to create a scene in my restaurant." But the scene was far from over. Unknown to everyone in the Golden Spoon, the lunch crowd at Murphy's Tavern 3 blocks away was beginning to stir. Murphy's was the unofficial headquarters of Portland's Thunder Mountain chapter of motorcycle enthusiasts. And word had just arrived that would change everything Marcus Thompson thought he knew about power and consequences. Big Mike Sullivan, a mountain of a man with arms like tree trunks and a heart to match, was finishing his burger when his phone buzzed with a text message. What he read made his blood run cold. Within minutes, he was on his feet, addressing the room full of leather-clad bikers with a voice that could have awakened the dead. "Brothers, we've got a situation." Big Mike Sullivan's massive frame cast a shadow across Murphy's Tavern as he stood before 37 members of the Thunder Mountain Motorcycle Club. The text message on his phone had ignited something deep and primal in the veteran biker community. The message was simple: Golden Spoon Restaurant. Owner humiliating disabled vet and service dog. Jake Morrison, Army, lost leg in Kandahar. Lead backup now. The sender was Tony Wrench Martinez, a club prospect who had been walking past the Golden Spoon when he witnessed Marcus Thompson's confrontation through the restaurant's floor-to-ceiling windows. Tony had served 2 tours in Afghanistan before joining the Thunder Mountain family, and seeing a fellow veteran treated with such contempt had activated every protective instinct he possessed. "Here's what we know," Big Mike announced, his gravelly voice commanding absolute attention. "Brother Jake Morrison, Army veteran, missing his right leg thanks to an IED in Afghanistan. He's getting disrespected by some rich prick who thinks money makes him better than people who actually bled for this." "Good country." The room erupted in angry murmurs and the scraping of chairs as bikers rose to their feet. These weren't weekend warriors playing dress-up. They were serious men and women who understood honor, sacrifice, and the unbreakable bonds forged in combat. Many were veterans themselves, carrying their own invisible and visible scars from service in Iraq, Afghanistan, and conflicts stretching back to Vietnam. "What's the play, Mike?" called out Sarah Phoenix Rodriguez, a Marine Corps veteran whose service dog, a golden retriever named Liberty, sat alert beside her chair. Phoenix understood better than most what Jake Morrison was experiencing. She'd faced similar discrimination, though never with such deliberate cruelty. Big Mike's weathered face hardened with determination. "We ride, all of us, right now. No weapons, no threats, no violence. We're going to show this restaurant owner what respect looks like. And we're going to make sure our brother Jake knows he's not alone." Within minutes, Murphy's Tavern had emptied as Thunder Mountain members gathered their gear and prepared to ride. The sound of motorcycle engines roaring to life echoed through the parking lot like rolling thunder. Chrome gleamed in the afternoon sun as 37 Harleys, Indians, and custom bikes lined up in formation. But the Thunder Mountain chapter wasn't riding alone. Big Mike had made calls during the mobilization, reaching out to allied clubs throughout the Pacific Northwest. The Iron Eagles from Seattle, the Desert Wolves from Spokane, the Coastal Riders from Eugene, all had brothers and sisters who understood the sacred obligation to protect those who had served. Back at the Golden Spoon, Marcus Thompson was savoring what he believed to be his victory. Jake Morrison sat rigid in his chair, Ranger pressed tightly against his leg as the service dog worked to manage his handler's escalating anxiety. The restaurant owner had retreated to his office. Confident that he had resolved the situation with appropriate firmness, Amanda Henderson was on her phone, her fingers flying across the keyboard as she documented the encounter on social media. Her posts were already gaining traction, shared by friends who were equally outraged by Marcus's behavior. The digital wildfire was spreading faster than anyone in the restaurant realized. "I can't believe this is happening," Margaret Henderson whispered, her voice thick with emotion. In 2025, in America, treating a veteran this way, Robert Henderson's business instincts were screaming warnings. As a successful contractor who had built his company on reputation and relationships, he recognized the magnitude of the mistake Marcus Thompson was making. This wasn't just bad customer service. It was a public relations disaster waiting to explode. Jake struggled to maintain his composure as Ranger performed deep pressure therapy, the dog's weight against his leg, helping to ground him in the present moment. The familiar symptoms were building: rapid heartbeat, shallow breathing, the sensation that the walls were closing in. But Ranger's training was exceptional, and the dog adjusted his position to provide maximum therapeutic benefit. "We should go," Jake said quietly, his voice barely audible above the restaurant's ambient noise. "I don't want to cause more problems for your family." "Absolutely not," Amanda fired back, her protective instincts fully engaged. "You didn't cause anything. This is about principle now. About what's right." Harrison Webb, the maitre d', approached their table with obvious reluctance. His years of experience in high-end hospitality had taught him to recognize brewing disasters, and every instinct told him this situation was spiraling beyond control. Marcus's heavy-handed approach violated not just moral standards, but potentially federal law. Perhaps we could find a compromise, Harrison suggested diplomatically. The private dining room has its own entrance. The dog could— His name is Ranger, Jake interrupted, a flash of steel entering his voice. And he's not the dog. He's a trained professional doing his job. Before Harrison could respond, the distant rumble of motorcycle engines began to penetrate the restaurant's sound-dampened interior. At first, it was barely noticeable, a low vibration that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. But as the sound grew louder and closer, diners began to pause their conversations and glance toward the windows. Marcus Thompson emerged from his office, drawn by the unusual noise. His expression shifted from confidence to confusion as the rumble intensified. Through the Golden Spoon's expansive windows, the first motorcycles came into view, a phalanx of chrome and leather rolling down the street like a mechanized cavalry charge. What in God's name? Marcus muttered, his face paling as more bikes appeared. The formation was impressive and intimidating, disciplined riders in matching colors, their machines gleaming in the afternoon sun. Big Mike Sullivan led the procession, his custom Harley-Davidson Road King commanding respect through sheer presence. Behind him rode Phoenix Rodriguez, Liberty secure in her specially designed sidecar, the service dog's golden coat bright against the black leather of her handler's jacket. The sight of another veteran with a service dog wasn't lost on the gathering crowd of spectators. The motorcycles filled every available parking space within 3 blocks of the Golden Spoon, their engines creating a symphony of power and purpose. As the riders dismounted and began walking toward the restaurant, their numbers became truly apparent. What had started as 37 Thunder Mountain members had swelled to over 150 bikers from clubs across the region. But this wasn't a mob or an angry rabble. These were disciplined veterans and their allies, moving with military precision and purpose. Many wore service ribbons and unit patches on their leathers, visible proof of their shared commitment to protecting those who had sacrificed for their country. Tony Wrench. Martinez met Big Mike at the restaurant's entrance, his young face tight with controlled anger. "The situation's gotten worse, Mike." The owner doubled down, threatened to call the cops on the vet. "Family's getting hostile, other customers are taking sides." "It's a powder keg in there," Big Mike nodded grimly. "Then it's time to show them what real respect looks like." Inside the Golden Spoon, Marcus Thompson watched in growing horror as the army of motorcycles surrounded his establishment. His exclusive clientele was pressing against the windows, their expensive lunch forgotten as they stared at the unprecedented gathering outside. Some looked fascinated, others appeared genuinely frightened. "Call the police," Marcus ordered Harrison, his voice cracking slightly. This is clearly an attempt at intimidation, but Harrison was already on his phone, though not to call law enforcement. As someone who had served briefly in the National Guard before entering the hospitality industry, he understood what was happening outside. This wasn't intimidation. This was a brotherhood responding to a call for help. Jake Morrison felt a strange mix of emotions as he realized what was unfolding. Through the window, he could see bikers dismounting, their movements coordinated and purposeful. Many wore visible signs of military service, and several had service dogs of their own. "Jake," Amanda whispered, her eyes wide as she watched the gathering crowd. "I think they're here for you." Ranger's tail gave a subtle wag, the first sign of relaxation the dog had shown since entering the restaurant. Somehow the service dog seemed to sense that the cavalry had arrived, and that his handler was no longer facing this battle alone. The stage was set for a confrontation unlike anything Portland had ever witnessed, where dignity, respect, and the true meaning of service would be tested in ways that Marcus Thompson never could have imagined. The Golden Spoon's pristine lobby transformed into a pressure cooker as Big Mike Sullivan pushed through the brass doors, followed by Phoenix Rodriguez and a steady stream of leather-clad veterans. The contrast was stark and deliberate. Polished marble floors suddenly echoed with the measured steps of combat boots, and crystal chandeliers reflected off chrome chains and military insignia. Timothy Walsh, the young doorman, found himself face to face with Big Mike's imposing figure. At 6'4" and built like a linebacker, Big Mike commanded attention without saying a word. His leather vest displayed patches from 3 combat deployments, a Purple Heart, and the Thunder Mountain colors that marked him as a leader among leaders. "We're here to see Jake Morrison," Big Mike said, his voice calm, but carrying the unmistakable authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. He might need some backup. Timothy's training hadn't prepared him for this scenario. The Golden Spoon's usual clientele consisted of tech executives and society wives, not battle-hardened veterans on a mission of solidarity. His hand trembled slightly as he reached for his radio. "Sir, I need to check with management about group accommodations." Phoenix Rodriguez stepped forward, Liberty walking perfectly at heel beside her. The contrast between her small stature and commanding presence was striking. Purple Heart and combat action ribbons were clearly visible on her vest, alongside patches indicating her service as a Marine Explosive Ordnance Disposal Specialist. "We're not looking for accommodations," Phoenix said, her voice carrying the quiet confidence of someone who had defused bombs under enemy fire. "We're looking for respect, something that seems to be in short supply around here." Behind them, more bikers continued to enter in disciplined waves. Eddie Priest Kowalski, a Vietnam veteran whose white beard couldn't hide the steel in his eyes. Maria Tank Santos, whose prosthetic arm hadn't slowed her down for a single day since her discharge. Danny Ghost Chen, whose service dog, a black Labrador named Shadow, wore the same focused expression as Ranger. The restaurant's wealthy patrons pressed themselves against the windows and walls, their lunch conversations dying to whispers. Some appeared frightened, but many seemed genuinely curious about the unprecedented gathering. The bikers moved with military precision, their behavior respectful but unmistakably determined. Marcus Thompson emerged from behind the host station like a general surveying an invasion. His face had gone pale, but his jaw remained set in stubborn defiance. Years of controlling his exclusive domain had convinced him that money and social position were the ultimate authority. He was about to discover how wrong that assumption could be. "This is a private establishment," Marcus announced, his voice pitched to carry across the lobby. "You're trespassing, and I'm calling the police." Big Mike's weathered face broke into a cold smile. "Go ahead. Portland PD's got plenty of veterans on the force. Ask for Sergeant Kelly Murphy. She served with the 101st Airborne. Or maybe Detective Rick Harrison lost his partner in Fallujah. See how they feel about a business owner discriminating against disabled veterans." The threat landed like a physical blow. Marcus's carefully constructed world of privilege and exclusivity suddenly felt much smaller and more vulnerable. These weren't ordinary protesters he could intimidate with legal threats. These were people who understood sacrifice, brotherhood, and the true meaning of service. In the private dining room, Jake Morrison felt his anxiety symptoms beginning to stabilize as Ranger's deep pressure therapy took effect. The sound of motorcycle engines and the knowledge that fellow veterans were gathering outside had triggered something unexpected. A sense of belonging he hadn't experienced since leaving the military. Amanda Henderson was documenting everything on her phone, her social media posts now going viral across multiple platforms. Local news stations had picked up the story, and television crews were already en route to what was becoming the biggest confrontation in Portland's recent memory. "Jake," Robert Henderson said quietly, "I think you need to see this." Through the private dining room's windows, Jake could see the incredible sight unfolding outside. The street had become a sea of motorcycles and leather-clad veterans, their formations stretching for blocks in every direction. American flags flew from several bikes, and the disciplined bearing of the riders left no doubt about their military backgrounds. But it was the service dogs that truly moved Jake to tears. He counted at least 20 working dogs among the crowd: German shepherds, golden retrievers, labradors, and several mixed breeds, all wearing official service vests and displaying the same professional focus as Ranger. Their handlers represented every branch of the military and every type of visible and invisible disability. "They came for me," Jake whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "All of them. They came for me." David Chen, the waiter, appeared at their table with tears in his eyes. As a second-generation immigrant whose grandfather had fought alongside American forces in Korea, he understood the significance of what was happening. "Sir, they just wanted you to know, most of the staff are on your side. What Mr. Thompson did, it's not who we are. It's not who America is supposed to be." Meanwhile, in the lobby, the confrontation was reaching a critical point. Marcus Thompson found himself surrounded not by an angry mob, but by a disciplined formation of veterans whose very presence challenged everything he believed about power and privilege. Phoenix Rodriguez stepped forward, Liberty maintaining a perfect position beside her. "Mr. Thompson, we're not here to cause trouble. We're here to educate. You see, when you disrespect one veteran, you disrespect all of us. When you deny access to a service dog, you're attacking the independence of every disabled person in America." "I don't care about your politics," Marcus shot back, though his voice had lost much of its earlier authority. "This is my business, and I decide who's welcome here." That's when Priest Kowalski spoke up, his voice carrying the weight of 5 decades of hard-earned wisdom. "Son, I've been fighting for this country since before you were born. I've buried more friends than you've probably made in your entire life. And I'm here to tell you that freedom isn't free, and respect isn't optional." The old veteran's words seemed to resonate with several of the restaurant's wealthy patrons. Dr. Catherine Mills, a prominent surgeon whose own son had served in Iraq, stepped away from her table and approached the group of bikers. "Excuse me," she said, addressing Phoenix directly. "I just wanted to say thank you for your service and for standing up for what's right. Mr. Thompson's behavior is absolutely unacceptable." Her words triggered a chain reaction. Other diners began to speak up, their voices joining in support of Jake Morrison and condemnation of Marcus Thompson's discriminatory actions. The carefully maintained atmosphere of exclusive privilege was cracking under the weight of basic human decency. Marcus watched his controlled environment dissolving before his eyes. The very clientele he had worked so hard to cultivate was turning against him, choosing solidarity with the veterans over loyalty to his establishment. His face flushed red with a mixture of anger and humiliation. "Get out!" he screamed, his composure finally cracking completely. "All of you, get out of my restaurant!" Big Mike Sullivan's response was measured and devastating in its simplicity. "We will, but Jake Morrison and his family finish their meal first. And you're going to personally apologize to that man and his service dog. Not because we're making you, but because it's the right thing to do." The ultimatum hung in the air like smoke from a battlefield. Every eye in the Golden Spoon was focused on Marcus Thompson, waiting to see what choice he would make. Outside, more motorcycles continued to arrive as word spread through veteran networks across the Pacific Northwest. The moment of truth had arrived, and Marcus Thompson was about to learn that some lines once crossed can never be uncrossed. Marcus Thompson stood frozen in his own lobby, the weight of over 150 pairs of eyes boring into him. The silence stretched like a taut wire, broken only by the distant rumble of more motorcycles arriving outside. His empire of exclusivity was crumbling around him, but his pride remained his greatest enemy. "I will not be intimidated in my own establishment," Marcus declared, though his voice cracked slightly. "Security! Call building security!" What Marcus didn't know was that building security consisted of exactly 2 guards: Frank Castellano, a former Marine who had already quietly positioned himself near the veterans, and Luis Moreno, whose brother had died in Afghanistan. Neither man was going to lift a finger to help Marcus Thompson humiliate a disabled veteran. Frank stepped forward, his security uniform unable to hide the military bearing that marked him as one of the Brotherhood. "Mr. Thompson, I think you need to reconsider your position. These people aren't causing any trouble. They're just asking for basic human decency." The betrayal by his own security staff sent Marcus into a fury. His carefully constructed image of control was disintegrating, and his response was to double down on the very behavior that had created this crisis. "You're all fired!" Marcus screamed, his face now purple with rage. "Every last one of you! Frank, Luis, David, Harrison, all of you! I'll have new staff by tomorrow who understand loyalty." But his staff wasn't backing down. David Chen stepped forward from the dining room, where he had been watching the confrontation unfold. Behind him came 3 other waiters, 2 busboys, and even the head chef, a grizzled former Navy cook named Ron Murphy, who had quietly emerged from the kitchen. "Mr. Thompson," David said with quiet dignity, "we've worked for you for years. We've watched you build this place into something successful. But what you did to that veteran, that's not the man we thought we worked for." Ron Murphy's gravelly voice cut through the tension like a knife. "I served on the USS Nimitz for 12 years, saw action in the Persian Gulf. I've watched that young man and his service dog through the kitchen window for the past hour, and I've never seen such professionalism under pressure. You should be ashamed of yourself." The kitchen staff began filing out behind Ron, their white uniforms a stark contrast to the black leather of the bikers, but their solidarity unmistakable. The Golden Spoon was experiencing a complete staff rebellion, triggered by Marcus's treatment of Jake Morrison. Outside, the crowd continued to grow. Word had spread through social media, and civilians were beginning to join the veterans. Local business owners, many of whom were veteran-owned establishments themselves, had closed their shops to show support. Portland's veteran community was demonstrating the kind of unity that Marcus Thompson had never experienced in his privileged life. Phoenix Rodriguez received a text message that made her smile grimly. "Mike," she called to Big Mike Sullivan, "Channel 8 News is 2 minutes out. Channel 12 and the Portland Tribune are right behind them." The prospect of media attention sent a new wave of panic through Marcus Thompson. His restaurant's reputation was everything in Portland's competitive dining scene. Bad publicity could destroy years of careful cultivation in a matter of hours. "Wait," Marcus said, his voice taking on a desperate edge. Let's discuss this rationally. Perhaps we can reach some sort of accommodation." Big Mike's weathered face showed no mercy. "The time for accommodation was an hour ago, when you could have treated a disabled veteran with basic human respect. Now the only accommodation we're interested in is a public apology." Inside the private dining room, Jake Morrison was struggling with conflicting emotions. Part of him wanted to simply leave and avoid any more confrontation. But another part, the part that had carried him through army training and 2 combat deployments, understood that this moment was bigger than just him. "I need to go out there," Jake told his family. Ranger sensing his handler's resolve and rising to attention. "This isn't just about me anymore. It's about every veteran who's ever been treated like a second-class citizen." Amanda Henderson squeezed her brother's hand. "We're with you, whatever you decide." The Henderson family stood as one, their earlier celebration forgotten in the face of something far more important. They had come to honor Jake's service. Now they would stand witness to something that would define his civilian life. As Jake made his way toward the lobby, supported by Ranger's steady presence, the crowd of bikers parted respectfully. These were people who understood hierarchy and respect, and they recognized Jake as the person they had come to support. Marcus Thompson found himself face to face with the man he had humiliated, and for the first time he truly looked at Jake Morrison. He saw the careful way Jake moved, accommodating his prosthetic leg. He saw Ranger's professional alertness, the dog's complete focus on his handler's well-being. He saw the quiet dignity of a man who had sacrificed more than Marcus could comprehend, but Marcus's pride remained stronger than his conscience. "I'm sorry this got out of hand," Marcus said, though his tone suggested anything but genuine remorse. "Perhaps if you had been more forthcoming about your situation from the beginning, we could have avoided this misunderstanding." The non-apology landed like a slap in the face. Jake's jaw tightened, and Ranger pressed closer to his handler, sensing the rising tension. Priest Kowalski's voice cut through the lobby like a rusty blade. "Son, that wasn't an apology. That was an insult wrapped in fancy words. You just blamed this young man for your own ignorance and prejudice." Tank Santos stepped forward, her prosthetic arm clearly visible as she pointed at Marcus. "You want to talk about situations? I lost this arm to an IED in Ramadi. My buddy lost both legs. Another friend came home in a flag-draped coffin. That's what serving your country costs. What exactly did building this restaurant cost you?" The question hung in the air like an accusation. Marcus Thompson had built his fortune and reputation, but he had never sacrificed anything more valuable than time and money. He had never bled for strangers, never carried dead friends, never woken up screaming from nightmares about battles fought in foreign lands. Danny Chen, whose service dog, Shadow, had been quietly assessing the situation, spoke up with the precision of someone accustomed to diffusing explosive situations. "Mr. Thompson, you have a choice to make. You can apologize sincerely and learn from this experience, or you can continue down this path and face the consequences. But understand this, we're not going anywhere until our brother gets the respect he's earned." The lobby fell silent again, the tension so thick it seemed to have physical weight. Through the windows, the glare of television camera lights began to illuminate the gathering crowd outside. The local news crews had arrived, and Portland was about to witness something unprecedented. Marcus Thompson looked around his lobby, at the veterans who had taken over his space, at his own staff who had abandoned him, at the wealthy patrons who were now filming everything with their phones. His perfect world of controlled exclusivity had become a public arena where his character was being judged by standards he had never bothered to understand. The moment of truth had arrived, and Marcus Thompson was about to discover that some mistakes can never be undone, only faced with whatever dignity a person can muster in their darkest hour. The Klieg lights from 3 news vans flooded the Golden Spoon's lobby with harsh white light as cameras rolled, capturing every moment of Marcus Thompson's public humiliation. Channel 8's veteran correspondent Jessica Torres had arrived with her crew and was already broadcasting live to the entire Portland metropolitan area. This is Jessica Torres reporting from downtown Portland, where an unprecedented gathering of veterans and motorcycle club members has surrounded the Golden Spoon restaurant after its owner allegedly discriminated against a disabled veteran and his service. "Dog," her voice carried clearly through the lobby's sound system as someone had turned up a nearby television. Marcus Thompson watched his reputation evaporate in real time as the news report continued. His face appeared on screen, captured through the restaurant's windows, looking exactly like what he had become, a man whose prejudice had finally caught up with him. Jake Morrison stood in the center of the lobby, Ranger at his side, surrounded by a protective circle of fellow veterans. The contrast was stark and symbolic. Jake's quiet dignity versus Marcus's desperate panic, honor versus arrogance, service versus selfishness. Big Mike Sullivan's phone buzzed with an incoming call. He glanced at the screen, and his weathered face broke into a grim smile. "Phoenix, Tank Priest, you're going to want to hear this." He put the call on speaker, and a familiar voice filled the lobby. "Big Mike, this is Colonel Patricia Ramirez, Portland VA Medical Center. I've been watching the news coverage, and I want you to know that the entire VA community stands behind Mr. Morrison. We're also conducting an immediate review of the Golden Spoon's federal contracts." Marcus's face went white. The Golden Spoon catered several high-profile government events each year, contracts worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. The prospect of losing that business was devastating enough. But the public nature of the announcement meant every potential client in Portland now knew about his discriminatory behavior. But Colonel Ramirez wasn't finished. Furthermore, we're recommending that all veteran-owned businesses in the Portland area reconsider any partnerships with establishments that don't respect the rights of disabled veterans and their service animals. The announcement triggered a cascade of consequences that Marcus had never anticipated. Dr. Catherine Mills, the surgeon who had spoken up earlier, was already on her phone cancelling a major medical conference that had been scheduled at the Golden Spoon. Other business leaders throughout the lobby began making similar calls. Harrison Webb, the maitre d' who had served Marcus faithfully for 5 years, stepped forward with a heavy heart. "Mr. Thompson, I've worked in hospitality for 15 years, and I've never been more ashamed of my workplace than I am right now. Consider this my resignation, effective immediately." The exodus of staff continued as the kitchen crew, waiters, and even the cleaning personnel walked out in solidarity with Jake Morrison. The Golden Spoon was bleeding employees, and Marcus was powerless to stop it. Phoenix Rodriguez approached Jake Morrison with Liberty at her side. The two service dogs seemed to communicate in that mysterious way working animals do, acknowledging each other's professionalism and shared purpose. "Jake," Phoenix said quietly, "I want you to know that what happened here today doesn't just stay here. Every veteran in the Pacific Northwest is going to hear about how you handled yourself under pressure. You represented all of us with honor." Jake's eyes filled with tears, not of sadness, but of overwhelming gratitude. For 3 years since his injury, he had struggled with feelings of isolation and worthlessness. Today, he had been reminded that he was part of something larger than himself, a brotherhood that would never abandon one of their own. The crowd outside had grown to nearly 300 people. Veterans, their families, and supporters from throughout Portland had converged on the Golden Spoon. American flags flew from motorcycle handlebars, and someone had started singing the Star-Spangled Banner. The entire gathering joined in, their voices carrying through the downtown streets like a battle cry for justice. Marcus Thompson found himself trapped in his own restaurant, surrounded by people whose values he had never understood and whose sacrifices he had never appreciated. The weight of his mistake was becoming clear as his business empire crumbled around him. Channel 12's business reporter, Michael Chang, pushed through the crowd with his cameraman. "Mr. Thompson, can you comment on reports that major Portland businesses are canceling events at your restaurant? What's your response to the veteran community's call for a boycott?" Marcus tried to push past the reporter, but there was nowhere to run. His safe space of privilege and exclusivity had become a fishbowl where his character was on display for all of Portland to judge. "No comment," Marcus stammered, but his obvious panic spoke volumes. It was then that Jake Morrison did something that shocked everyone present. He stepped forward, placed his hand gently on Marcus's shoulder, and spoke with quiet authority. "Mr. Thompson," Jake said, his voice cutting through the chaos, "I want you to understand something. This isn't about revenge. This isn't about destroying your business. This is about education. About understanding that service dogs aren't pets, that disabled veterans aren't inconveniences, and that respect isn't something you get to ration based on how people look." The lobby fell silent as Jake continued, Ranger maintaining perfect position beside his handler. "I didn't serve my country so I could be treated like a second-class citizen. I didn't lose my leg so you could feel uncomfortable during your lunch service. I served because I believe in an America where everyone deserves dignity and respect." Jake's words hit Marcus like a physical blow. For the first time, the restaurant owner seemed to truly comprehend the magnitude of what he had done. This wasn't just bad customer service. It was an attack on the fundamental values that Jake Morrison had bled to defend. Marcus began, his voice barely a whisper. "I don't know what to say. Big Mike Sullivan stepped forward, his massive presence somehow less intimidating than it had been earlier. How about starting with "I'm sorry"? Real sorry, not the fake corporate apology you tried earlier. Marcus Thompson looked around the lobby one more time, at the veterans who had given so much for their country, at his former staff who had chosen principle over paychecks, at the news cameras documenting his fall from grace. For the first time in his adult life, he was forced to confront the difference between what he had achieved and what he had actually earned. "Jake," Marcus said, his voice breaking with genuine emotion, "I am truly deeply sorry. What I did was wrong. What I said was wrong. I have no excuse for my behavior, and I don't deserve your forgiveness. But I'm asking for the chance to learn from this, to do better, to be better." The apology hung in the air like a prayer. It wasn't perfect, but it was real, the first authentic words Marcus Thompson had spoken all day. Jake Morrison looked at the broken man before him and made a decision that surprised everyone, including himself. "Mr. Thompson, I accept your apology, but more importantly, I hope you understand that this is just the beginning. Real change requires more than words." And then Jake did something that transformed the entire situation. He turned to address the crowd of veterans and supporters. "Everyone, I want to thank you for standing up for me today. But I also want to challenge all of us to turn this moment into something positive. Mr. Thompson, I'd like to propose something. One Saturday each month, the Golden Spoon hosts a free meal for disabled veterans and their service animals. Not as charity, but as respect. As recognition, as education for your staff and customers about what service really means." The proposal stunned everyone, especially Marcus Thompson. Jake Morrison had just offered him a path to redemption, a way to transform his mistake into something meaningful. Marcus nodded slowly, tears streaming down his face. Yes, absolutely. Every month for as long as I own this restaurant." The crowd began to disperse, but not before something remarkable happened. One by one, veterans approached Marcus Thompson to shake his hand, not because they forgave him immediately, but because they recognized the courage it took to admit such a profound mistake. 6 months later, the Golden Spoon had become Portland's most respected restaurant. No, not for its exclusivity, but for its inclusivity. The monthly veteran appreciation events had grown into community celebrations that brought together people from all walks of life. Jake Morrison had returned to school to become a counselor for disabled veterans, with Ranger still at his side. His experience at the Golden Spoon had taught him that sometimes the most powerful victories come not from defeating your enemies, but from helping them become better people. Marcus Thompson had learned that true class isn't about keeping people out. It's about opening doors for everyone. The lesson had cost him his pride, but it had given him something far more valuable, his humanity. And in Portland, whenever someone needed a reminder about the power of standing up for what's right, people still talked about the day when 180 Hells Angels taught a restaurant owner the true meaning of service. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.